That's been an important contact for us because what we've been able to do is work with that group directly, and they have a pretty good reach in the city of Asheville. So we've been able to connect with them, and there are people in Asheville that have a strong interest in this and really want to kind of participate at a deeper level. They want to do more than just show up at a meeting. So the coalition, if you pulled that data out of that chart there, what you would see, and what we expect is most people that are participating and providing information about noise complaints usually live in close proximity to a noise producer. Nothing really surprising. The survey, there are some questions that you can choose, kind of predetermined questions, and you can rate is car noise, for example, significantly, moderately, or not disruptive. It's interesting that people that take the survey, and again, we had more than 1,000 of those, and they choose the multiple choice questions, which is the easiest way to take the survey. When you collate that data, what you tend to see are things like mufflers, car horns, barking dogs, emergency sirens. You'd be surprised how much people are frustrated by emergency sirens, road traffic, construction. The one thing I would kind of caution this committee and put out there is those 5 things, those top 5 that come in the multiple choice survey, they tend to be the most difficult to address, actually. I mean, so quite frankly, realistically, and I say this, we can't bury 26. We can't afford to put sound walls all up and down 26 either. So some of these issues that come up on the multiple choice, we're not going to turn the sirens off, the ambulances. So some of these are actually very difficult for the city. And quite frankly, there may be other ways to address those outside of a noise ordinance. Just because, if trains make noise, well, the noise ordinance may not be the best way to address that. There may be other ways working with, quiet zones through the railroad company. So we try to encourage people, just because the noise ordinance can't address it, doesn't mean it can't be addressed in another means or by another avenue. But when you get into conversations with people and you begin to get written feedback on the survey, so when you actually touch people directly, then you begin to see what I think are some of the areas that the noise ordinance can address and what I think will be some of the difficult decision points for this council. Nuisance dog barking, lawn equipment, noisy neighbors, dogs that bark, neighbors go to work, leave the dog outside, it barks 8 hours, you work at home, and you're right beside the fence for the dog. It's construction comes up a lot. Night construction at night, after hours work, things like that. Music over amplification. And I want to say about music, it's a complicated topic. There's a lot of people that fill out the survey and say we love music in Asheville. So there's a lot of support for it. But then there's also, comments we get about music that's over amplified, that's really loud, that's at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, the windows are open, they've got a DJ, it's extremely loud. So I do think there's a lot of feedback that tells us music amplification may be a discussion point we need to work through. Industrial institutional use and equipment. So that's, HVAC equipment that runs 24/7. That's manufacturing facilities that have, loud noise at times. And that's kind of a land use issue in a way, because those are examples where you have residential neighborhoods that are right beside industrially zoned properties. So you have some inherent land use conflict that exists, and noise is part of that. At that time, they can't provide the service because they have to get in, get trash picked up, and they need to do that before the city wakes up and kind of becomes alive. And so to their credit, they actually try to plan routes based on where people are and where people aren't. So they try to program their early morning pickups in industrial areas and areas where you don't have a lot of people, but ultimately they're trying to make decisions on. So within those topic areas, what are people saying exactly? It's too loud. It's the time of day. It's a Tuesday. We've got school the next day. It's every day of the week. It's 4 times a week, whatever it may be. People are projecting sound into public spaces at unusual hours. Just the land use patterns, it matters at unusual hours. The land use patterns, it matters if you're beside the bar, it's different than being 3 blocks away from the bar. So proximity to residential, sustained and constant sound. The HVAC equipment runs at 56 decibels 24 hours a day. Periodic intense sound. The trash, they drop the dumpster every other day at 5:30 in the morning, and it's a loud bang. So those are the types of sounds that are generated by these types of uses that I think will be decision points that need to be made on this noise ordinance. So all those forums we had, we wanted to share a couple of takeaways because we met with different, I'm going to talk about industrial, institutional groups, businesses, and then residents. I want you to see kind of, we had these meetings, we tried to get people to summarize at the end and say, tell us where you're at with the noise ordinance, industrial and institutional operators. We had more than 25 industrial and institutional and construction contractors participate in this forum. And their advice to us and to the city council was do not use a broad brush approach. The city's unique and different areas operate differently. Develop measures that can be applied in specific contexts. Again, that's the thought that maybe things that happen in an industrially zoned area might be a little different than things that happen in a residentially zoned area. Be more strategic. Develop both quantitative and qualitative measures. I found the industrial folks like things that are measurable. They're like DSD, we like numbers and things, and we follow rules. So they want to see more objective, quantifiable measures. And then a big thing in that group with institutional industry was consider pre-existing issues. That's very difficult to do, but I understand that because if you've had a manufacturing facility in a location for 40 years and a residential development is built beside that, that's a difficult situation. Again, those residents are entitled to quality of life, but at the same time, you've just got some land use conflict that's got to be worked through. The Business Noise Forum, again, we had more than, as at the Chamber of Commerce, we had more than 50 participants in that, and we targeted, kind of umbrella groups like AIR and the Chamber and the Brewers Alliance. So we had 50, which was a significant turnout. A lot of those individuals represent groups of people. And some of their takeaways were balance, acknowledge that areas are rapidly changing, you've got mixes of land uses, give appropriate weight to received input. So we need to make decisions based on the collective input, maybe not just one or two individual experiences. Consider cultural and economic impacts. Everyone benefits from Asheville's vibrancy. Again, that's, if we make a rule, let's really think through the unintended outcomes of that rule and even consider economic impacts. Take advantage of community-based expertise. There are a lot of people that know a lot about noise in this community, a lot more than me. I'll be the first to admit that. There are people in businesses that do this for a living and understand decibels. Have a feedback loop. I had a really good conversation with one business owner that there's complaints that we receive about the business owner, but the business owner doesn't know who's complaining, so they never get to have a conversation. And this one particular owner told me if I knew I want to be a good business and a good neighbor, I would actually be willing to probably make changes to address that. So one of the underlying things that we've thought about in DSD is how do we create more direct community-based feedback loops that perhaps problems can be solved before they get to the city, which would be ideal. Look for solutions, shared responsibilities, and then kind of avoiding adverse, conflicts or adverse situations. Like basically having an ordinance that doesn't immediately move us towards a conflict between a business and a group of residents. Are there ways to avoid that, that adversarial relationship? Not always, but maybe there are some strategies. Then the Residents Noise Forum, this is what we're hearing from the residents, is there are mental health impacts of noise. A way it was described to me that I think is a good example is if you had to listen to something that was 55 decibels, which is reasonably loud, and you had to listen to it 24/7, it's bothersome, but it becomes even more bothersome when you know you can't control that. Like you have no ability to influence that thing that's bothering you. So I thought that was a good example from one of our residents. Prioritize consistent APD enforcement and training. That was a big comment we've gotten. And again, I always defend APD because I think they're working around the ordinance they have, but I think people want to see more consistency among APD and how they approach noise. Consider technical solutions for improved communication and reporting. That's just the concept of how do you address noise, how do you mitigate noise. Provide clear guidelines to special event permit holders. What are the city's expectations if you're going to have an event? When does it end? What are the parameters in which you operate? Make permit holders accountable. Residents have a lot of conversation about accountability in this. They don't feel like there's a lot of accountability around these ordinances. I thought this was a good idea too, is in terms of construction and if there are things that are being built that we know have potential conflict down the road, try to address those really early. So when DSD is talking about construction and let's talk about noise for a music venue when it's being built, not 10 years after it's built. So that's being proactive at the city level. And then enforcement violations with teeth. So next steps. we're in engagement, we're wrapping up engagement, but one of the things that we know we have to do for a few more weeks is targeted. I mentioned this, but I'll say it again. We want to make sure that we understand where the gaps in engagement are, and we take one last chance or one last push to get out in those areas and make sure we give people an opportunity to participate. So we want to kind of get all the information and data, map it, see where we're getting participation, see where we're not, and then making another effort to reach those communities or businesses or whatever it may be. Probably in late June, we're going to start to summarize some of these findings, start to compile some best practices, begin to think about what an ordinance may look like. I don't think we come straight out of that with an ordinance. I think we identify, here are topic areas, here are ways that those topics can be addressed. I would say an intermediate step is, once that's done, is to go back to these stakeholders and say, hey, we heard you, we developed this, did we get it right? You know, where are the areas we still don't have agreement? And again, see if we can work through that as much as reasonably possible before we actually bring this body an ordinance. And I would like to think that when we bring this body an ordinance, we can say, these 22 things are solved, we've got these 3 left we got to figure out. And here are some recommendations and some comments around those 3 topic areas. So then you'll be in a position, hopefully, to make a good decision that benefits the entire community as much as possible. That's a long presentation, so thank you.
I see Asheville Police Department being a strong stakeholder. Have we surveyed them to get feedback on their experience when they respond to noise complaints?
We've had about 5 meetings with APD. We initially started meeting with sergeants and lieutenants, the folks that are actually on the ground level doing this. Earlier this week, actually, I went and met with the chiefs and kind of gave that senior leadership group an update. To this point, they've been, I'd say, more in listening mode, but they have given us some feedback about the difficulty of the current ordinance. But we do have them engaged, and I recognize that they have to be able and willing to enforce anything that we produce or recommend.
But no recommendations?
No, they've been more in listening, but I think APD, I think they want more objective criteria, so they want to, because I think from their perspective, if the noise ordinance said 70 decibels, whatever it may say, I think they feel like there's times when maybe there's a complaint and they could say, I know you're frustrated, but this business is at 68 decibels. So, I mean, they actually kind of see a way that if it's objective, it may de-escalate some of the conflict they have to go through. I think there's some objective criteria, but I think there's some, not concern, I think there also, though, is a reality that if we start adding noise meters, complexity, so there's training, resource, and staffing concerns that I think that I would argue there's some thought process around that in APD. I don't really want to speak for them, but I can tell, you know, we need to be aware of the impact on that department, the more complexity we add on this for them. Good. Thank you.
So if there's anyone here that would like to make public comment while we're on the noise ordinance, you're welcome to do so at this time.
I hadn't planned to make any comments, but Ben's raised some issues. The bottom line in a lot of this,
Mike, say your name.
I'm sorry.
Your
My name is Mike Lewis, and I live in Asheville. The bottom line in a lot of this is civility. And we talk a lot about civility today, thinking about your neighbors, taking them into consideration. We had some real problems. I live on Graceland Road, and we had some real problems on Woodvale and Melrose until a few years ago. My neighbor, David Rogers, was pretty much involved in the current noise ordinance. And you know, we walked away from that and thought, this is not going to work. And that was 5-6 years ago or more. We solved a lot of our problems, or most of our problems, by contacting property owners, because most of the noise was coming from renters partying at late at night. And I haven't gotten any feedback on anything recently. The thing that I think is a current issue, at least for me, is trash haulers coming around about 5:30. One came by 3 times about a year ago within about a 20-minute period. I think he was lost. But generally, they would go to the Graceland Gardens apartments behind us and bang around on their dumpsters, and then come out and get on Graceland and go to Kimberly and out to the Coburn apartments and bang around on their dumpsters. And I talked with our CRO at the time, Officer Justin Wilson, and he finally got in touch with them and then knocked it off for a while. But on 2 of the last Fridays, about 5:15, here comes a big trash truck, and I haven't been able to identify who it's from, but I'll try to identify them and try to get in touch with our new CRO. There are some things that are just annoying. I complained to City Council about 3 weeks ago about the heavy dump trucks coming by my house, and literally about every 5 to 10 minutes, one was coming by, and I got behind one on Merriman one day and followed it. They were over working on the paving, spending our bond money, putting our bond money to good use over on South Griffing and Griffing Circle. And you can't get rid of that kind of stuff. But it would be nice if the city, when we pass this ordinance, would say, look, see if you can work out a way that you don't use the same route all the time. But noise is an issue, and I think Ben has done a masterful job of outlining the issues and the stakeholders. I hope that we can get an enforceable ordinance, and I think that's probably going to be arming the police force with dB meters. And then we've got the obligation to keep the dB meters calibrated so that we don't end up with the same problem we had with the radar guns a few years ago, that we can't enforce anything because our instruments are out of calibration. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon, Kim Roney. I just want to share an experience, and I also took the survey. As a pedestrian, I walk and bike. Yesterday on my way home from the multimodal meeting, a truck just revved the engine right in front of my face. And it made me think about the survey and how the sound of exhaust, which turns out is around 95 to 100 decibels, and mufflers, is the thing that like bugs me the most. But music in a car is in the same part of the survey. And the kinds of music that we prefer and like are going to be less obnoxious to us than the ones that we don't like. I listen to lots of different kinds of music. I'm not going to get into that right now. But I just don't think that should be in the same part of the survey, so that's a big issue for me. So thank you for your consideration.
All right, if there's no one else, we'll move on. New business, proposed public street name change of most southern portion of Park Avenue North to Artful Way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, my name is Stuart Rohrbaugh. I'm a land planner employed by the City of Asheville. I work for the Development Services Department. I'm here on behalf of my director, Mr. Ben Woody, to present some proposed street name changes. I brought 3 of them, but I'm only going to be asking for action on 2 of them. The first one I was going to present is Park Avenue North. Inside your packet, you'll see a map, and it shows basically we had one street named Park Avenue North. In the 1970s, DOT built the Haywood Road Bridge and split that street into 2 different segments. The most southern section had two structures on it. Now there are no addressable structures on that section, so the timing is right to request a street name change because it would not affect any of those property owners. Staff worked with the adjoining property owners in the community, and they proposed the street name Artful Way. It is a public street, and as a public street, requires a resolution to be passed by City Council, does require a public hearing have to advertise. With the open meeting laws, notices must be posted on the property and published in the newspaper, and then individual mail notices to the individual property owners. I've not had a lot of feedback from these property owners in regards to the street renaming. The benefit of changing the duplicated street name is to eliminate the possibility of confusion during emergency response. So I'm here to ask for a motion to change the most southern portion of the Park Avenue North to Artful Way and authorize the city manager to schedule a future public hearing date for council. Did y'all have any questions in these regards?
I can make that motion.
Make that motion. Second. Okay. Have a second? Did you second?
Do we have a second?
Second. Okay. All right, so let's move on.
Okay.
Go to B, proposed public street name change of Wilbar Avenue to Lee Garden Lane.
Thank you. The Lee Walker Heights property is rezoned to allow for a complete redevelopment of the property. The developer requested early on in the process to name the newly created street, or the newly to be constructed street, Lee Garden Lane. There's a small portion of the existing street named Wilbar that's actually a public street, right where it connects to Short Cox Avenue. So inside your agenda packet, you have a map that shows about a 150-foot section of Wilbar Avenue that's public. Since it is public, it would require city council action to officially rename that portion of the street from Wilbar Avenue to Lee Garden Lane. The timing is right on this one as well because the existing structures are no longer occupied. Demolition is slated later this summer, and so no structures would be reassigned a new street address until the new development would be constructed. So asking for city council to consider changing the street name of Wilbar Avenue to Lee Garden Lane and authorize the city manager to schedule a future public hearing. Any questions on this one?
I make that motion.
I have a comment and a concern, because I've been seeing on social media the past residents of the Lee Walker Heights neighborhood. They have T-shirts with Wilbur Avenue and Lee Walker Heights, just as a way to honor Lee Walker Heights. So I was just wondering, within this process, do we survey that community, even though they're no longer there? I think there is a plan for them to return. And the reason why I bring this up, to survey them, because subtle changes like this can add to some type of anxiety about them returning to that community, because I think there is some anxiety around that plan. So, number one question, is surveying the community a part of this process? And number two, is there any way that we could possibly have conversations with the housing authority about some unintended anxiety or consequence behind that name change?
Glad you brought that up. I will definitely work towards that. I can't speak firsthand in regards to the feedback from the community. The developer of the property could probably best answer, but I'm hearing this through hearsay. One of the coordinators, Tara Irby, told me through the housing meetings many years ago, is one of the residents that actually proposed this new street name, Lee Garden Lane. So for about 3 years, all of the development plans had proposed that name, Lee Garden Lane, but I'll for sure find out more information in those regards.
So, Shanika, would you suggest, I'm just trying to figure out, to give staff guidance. What do you think, getting hold of
I make a
housing
motion
authority
to,
for the people who?
yeah, I make a motion to hold this consideration until we make proper connections with stakeholders
Very
about the
good.
name change.
So I withdraw my motion.
Very good. Thank-
Oh, yeah, second. Well, you don't need to.
Okay.
If it doesn't go forward, then.
That certainly gives me enough direction to come back at another time. I will tell you, and I failed to tell you, inside your agenda packet, you do have a petition that's signed by the property owners, and one of those is the Housing Authority. One of them is Mountain Housing Authority has facilitated the signature of that petition with the Housing Authority representatives and all the other adjoining properties that adjoin that small portion of the right-of-way. Thank you for that.
Okay. So now we move on to C, proposed public.
Are you gonna move forward with C, or, I thought you said you were proposing two.
Two, but I just wanted to provide an update if you would indulge me in that.
Yes.
So it was on your agenda to consider a street name change of Robin Street. We thought we had some consensus on a street name. We had a proposed street name, and then clearly heard the majority did not like that street name, so they're working amongst themselves to propose another street name. They're circulating a petition. The timing seemed right on that one as well, because no one is using the street name Robin. There is some proposed development along there for some future homes to be constructed. We're getting the input from those developers as well as the longtime property owners to come back another time to propose another street name. Again, this one's only coming to you because it is a public street, and it would require council's action before a street name change could be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. If there's anyone wishing to make further public comment, you can do so at this time.
Thank you. My name's Patrick Conan. I wanted to actually comment on APD's traffic stop report, which was not presented at the last meeting. There wasn't a video of that meeting, but I read the minutes, and I just wanted to comment on the importance of that report as someone who worked with APD to create the versions of that report that came to this committee several times. I'm still not entirely clear from the minutes why that report stopped being provided, but I think that council, I saw from your comments that you did encourage APD to provide a summary of that data. The open data is great, but I can't just go on there and make a report out of it. It's important to get APD's perspective on that data, and it's important for APD to be looking and discussing that data internally as well. So I thank council for encouraging APD and staff to continue that process. However, I feel that we already have a report, so I don't think we need to create something new. I think we should just start doing what we're doing to this point again. I also think that, early on in the process around that report, there was a collaborative effort to decide what was included in that report. That ended after a few meetings. That hasn't happened in quite some time, but I thought that that was a collaborative process, just as the APD open data efforts have been collaborative and productive. So I think that we can do better around the traffic stop data, but I thank council for at least keeping that process going. Beyond that, on traffic stops, I think it's important for this committee to provide some accountability on the policies that council passed almost a year ago now. The policies were written consent for both vehicles and pedestrians, restricting the categories under which consent can be requested, and deprioritizing regulatory stops. I understand that a draft policy on written consent has been provided to the city manager's office, but a site I help operate called Sunshine Request has asked for that, and it's taken 6 weeks and we can't see it. The other policies, I have no idea where they are in the process. So, from a citizen's perspective, I feel like this committee really has to provide some accountability around those policies, especially as we hire a new chief. And I would encourage this committee to consider requesting monthly updates on each one of those policies so the public knows where we are. It seems like with traffic stops in general, we keep talking about it, but then we don't know where we are. So I just encourage this committee to fill that role. Thank you.
Okay.
That's why I came here today as well. My name is Kim Roney. I wanted to ask to support the recommendations from Sunshine Request. It has been over a year since we've been waiting to see these policies come into the light, and that's too long, especially while we're waiting for our police chief and while we're seeing increases in the APD budget. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Brandon Pickens, and since we're on the subject about the APD and how law enforcement is handled in Asheville in general, I'm a resident of this county. I've had problems with law enforcement pretty much entirely my whole life, preferably with dealing with harassment. I'm not perfect. I have done time for stuff that I regret doing, but I mean, I've done my time. I'm back in the community. Like even now, I'm a full-time student at Apd Tech. I got personal goals that I'm trying to accomplish to re-enter myself in society, but it's like, I get a lot of anxiety with myself. I already have mental health problems as it is. I'm actually classified as a disabled student, but yeah, I mean, I haven't even been out a year, and it's like I continually get harassed by the police officers, and it seems like every time that I try to go about doing stuff the right way, I go file a complaint on the officer. Because I mean, for one, I do have constitutional rights. And then two is just, like they said, it's certain policies and stuff that they gotta abide by when they out here policing people. And it's like when they come to these urban communities, like where people like where I come from, it's like they overstep their boundaries. And it's like I said, I filed complaints on several occasions, like even with the situation, I don't even know if you heard about the situation that happened on Smoky Park. I wasn't even out a whole month. I wasn't doing nothing wrong. The ticket that he said was his reason for pulling me over, it got dismissed in court. They found that I didn't even do nothing for him to pull me over in the first place, and he held me over there for 4 hours, literally tore up my car and took me and my cousin in the bathroom and strip searched us for nothing. You know what I'm saying? And it's like I keep going through this, and when we initially had filed the complaint with the sheriff's department, and they didn't do nothing about it. That's why we went to the media about it and got lawyers involved. And it's like they run around here like cowboys doing all this stuff in these urban communities, and it puts, because like I'm an example, at an early age, I was victimized to the justice system because of these practices. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I do hold a lot of resentment towards the police department and how they do that stuff, but I moved on. Like I said, I moved on. I'm trying to do what I can. I got 2 kids now. I'm 34. I'm not getting any younger. So, I mean, I'm just trying to do what I can to be a positive role model to my kids. But it just frustrates me, and just to have to be out here and have to continue to deal with this. It's an officer named Zetterholm. He didn't even blue light me or nothing. My car was legally parked in a parking lot at Greens, and he ran up on me and pulled his gun out on me to arrest me for a DWLR. I mean, I went and turned myself in at the county jail over worse charges than that. So what kind of threat do I impose on you for an arrest on a DWLR that makes you want to pull your gun out on me? I've recently filed a complaint on them about that, and I'm waiting to see what they're going to do about it, because I quoted policy and everything. But, I mean, I think it just needs something to be done with how they interact with individuals that are residents in urban communities here in Buncombe County, because the way they go around, because like I said, I've lived it. I grew up, these are the communities that I come from. So, I mean, you get these officers that don't even really know what's going on. They're not really trying to talk to people and see how things are going on in these type of environments. And they make these split decisions based on like they training and stuff, and then they just go about doing stuff the wrong way, and then it just creates distrust from the community. because I'm not only speaking for myself personally, I'm speaking for everybody in these communities. So, I mean, I just think it needs to be taken in consideration, and that's all I gotta say.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if that's all I would like to ask that, Anika, that maybe we could get updates that Patrick has requested for our next meeting. And with that, anybody else? We'll adjourn.